And gentlemen, welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. Today's a beautiful day here in Vermont, a beautiful day. And with us is my old college buddy, Kate Manning, author of this wonderful book, Gilded Mountain, which is it's about Sylvie Pelletier. She comes from Vermont. She goes out to Colorado with her family and gets involved. Well, her dad is a miner. Marble miner, and she gets involved with the labor movement, and it is tremendous fun to read. And Kate and I were in a very, very formative fiction writing class. Kate was a senior, I was a freshman, and we had this class with this guy, Gordon Lish, who was the fiction editor at Esquire, and his approach to fiction writing has imbued how I approach painting. And Kate has a bunch of painters in her family. So she's going to give us an overview of the circumstances around the book. And then we're going to chew the fat a little bit about the intersection of art and writing. And we're going to have us a time. And you're going to have a time too. So you come along with us. I'm going to turn the screen. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Betty Sue. Betty Sue is about to go out on the road again tomorrow, and so she's doing laundry today, so she's unable to do the technical stuff. So I'm doing it badly from my perch here. If you got questions or comments, throw them up on the screen, and I'll read them if I can, if I see them. But Kate's going to do a little slideshow for us to take us through the alpha and the omega of Gilded Mountain. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Charlie. It's amazing to see you. You look exactly the same as you did when you were a freshman in college.
I was rocking the white boy fro.
Delightful. That's the last slide, so you got to go all the way back.
Oh no!
Yeah, you got to go all the way back to the beginning.
I'm going to go back to this and do that discreetly.
All right, yeah. But I will say before the way I like to start is to say that I do come from a family of painters. My mother's a painter. My grandmother was a painter. My uncle's a painter. My children paint and sculpt. And I am very much fueled by what I see around me in the world. And so photographs and just looking very hard at the world and noticing is how I go about writing and trying to set down what I feel and see. So if you change slides now.
Is this your second or third novel?
It's my third novel.
My
third novel. The first one was called White Girl. The second one was called My Notorious Life. And that was also
the woman who performed abortions. And
right. It was based on the true story of a midwife and an abortion provider in New York. True story. So
okay, take us away to the wonderful world of Quarrytown.
Sure. This picture, I just began looking at these women and children living at 9,000 feet in the Colorado mountains, and I started to wonder, how did you raise kids in an environment like that? How did you cook? How did you do the laundry? So I started to write a story in the voice of this young girl, Sylvie Pelletier. I sort of thought, okay, she lives here, and she's French Canadian. She's the daughter of French Canadian immigrants, and she's looking to find she's determined to find a different life for herself. So look at the next slide. In this is another picture of Quarrytown. I didn't find, it was very hard to find Sylvie, because if you want to tell a woman's story from the past, you have to look in the shadows. You have to read between the lines. You have to find diaries and letters. So if you look over on the right side of your screen, maybe you just see the outline of a skirt over there in the shadow there. And that was a woman. And I thought, okay, Virginia Woolf says there's a girl in the picture too. And I would rather have her story than the 150th life of Napoleon, right? So You might want to know, well, why was I looking out there in Colorado? And if you go to the next slide, you'll see why. And that's this picture, which hangs behind me in my office. It's this picture of monument dealers in Marble, Colorado. Found it in my family attic. And I took it to my dad many years ago. And I said, why do we have this picture? And he said, well, I think one of the guys in it is my grandfather, meaning my great grandfather, and that he had something to do with quarrying the marble for the Lincoln Memorial. And I said, wow, well, with Colorado, what, he didn't know anything else about it. And I kind of pictured a guy with a pickaxe, honestly. But it turned out that this ancestor of mine was actually the president of the company that quarried that stone for the Lincoln Memorial. And he actually at one time was mayor of Rutland, Vermont, which I did not know even when I traveled around Vermont. So in the next slide, I didn't want to tell his story. I wanted to tell Sylvie's story. But looking at pictures like this, I tried to see it through a young woman's eyes. Her father is a laborer in a big, vast quarry like this one. And she really sees his exhaustion. She sees her mother's resignation. He works for pennies in very dangerous conditions and in sub-zero temperatures. So next slide. As I wrote, I realized that I didn't know very much about our country's labor movement, and I don't think many of us know. It's a history that's violent and dramatic and bloody and really inspiring stories about people overcoming hardship against impossible odds. So, when you're writing, you probably have the same thing in painting, Charlie. You see a detail like marble blocks weighed 48 tons. And you don't necessarily have to put that in there, but just the way a painter needs to know about anatomy to be to do a portrait, for example, or to do the human form. You're not showing the bones, but you know where they go. So this kind of fact is interesting, but I hope the book wears its research lightly. So in the next slide, Sylvie is hearing a lot about rumors of a union drive, and she sees how laborers are made to shovel track 14 feet of snow for no pay.
Right, that was an astonishing fact I didn't realize.
That
it was dead work.
Yeah, a lot of it. And coal miners had to shovel track and clear tunnels for no pay.
Wow, amazing.
They were paid by
one thing I want to mention to folks is that the character of Sylvie, I mean, she really is what propels us, the viewer, the reader, through the story, because she starts out as kind of a blank slate. She's just a young girl turning into a woman, and she is as kind of in awe of all of this that we are learning about as we are, as you take us through it. I don't want to give away too much.
But I think you raise a good point, and it was difficult for me in some ways to write this blank slate, a naive character. But I felt that I was learning as she was learning, and I was also very interested in the way the way a woman is taught to be silent and to be quiet and to be a good girl. And so I was interested in exploring the way she would find her voice, what would propel her to find a way to speak up and become her own person. So if you go to the next slide, again, you see that these pictures are they inform so much for me. I would stare at these pictures and notice the tin wash tub on the side of that cabin, or the way the steps go up an extra level just to get in your door when the snow is that high. And in Vermont, you know that too. But these are shacks that are clinging to the side of a hill with very little on a precipice, and the cabin too. How do you stay warm? You know, the pipes, tin pipe just sticking out the top. So, of course, if you go to the next slide, some characters in this novel are based on real people, real events, and a real place. But I changed names, I changed details, borrowed historical facts. And for example, the next slide, this woman, Sylvia Smith, was a fearless newspaper editor in the town of Marble, which serves as the model for Moonstone, Colorado, in the novel. So I named Sylvie after her because I respected her so much. She was pro-labor, she was pro-women's suffrage, she was pro-civil rights in a time when women didn't even have the vote. So you can see she was writing about a strike, she was writing about Booker T. Washington, and she was also writing really critical stories about the company town where she published. And for that, she suffered very severe consequences. So Sylvie is apprenticed to an editor like this in the novel. And go to the next slide. At the same time, there was a newspaper war going on in this tiny town. There was a newspaper called The Booster, which was run by the company, funded by the company. And it tended to run very folksy stories about litters of kittens and hay rides and rosy prospects for investment in the marble business. So this young woman begins to understand that the way you see the world depends on who's telling you the story. And that reminded me a lot of our own times. And I kept finding parallels between then and now. So, of course, she's young and luxury tempts her. Go to the next slide. Particularly the local manor house, which is modeled on this actual place in Redstone, Colorado.
I've been there. It's a restaurant. Isn't there a restaurant in there now?
It's been many, many things.
When I was there 20 years ago, there was a restaurant in there.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I went on a tour of it, and it really does have wallpaper made from the hides of elephants that the coal baron who built it shot in Africa. And I felt, when you find a detail like that, just as when you see the light in a certain way on a certain old rusty piece of farming equipment, you just have to use it, right? So Sylvie manages to get herself a job in the manor house like this. And if you go to the next slide, she's working for the local, the Duke and the Countess, who were modeled on this couple, Osgood and his wife, Alma, who was rumored to be European royalty. And I think she may have started that rumor herself. So in my novel, there's a counterfeit countess. And if you go to the next slide, this guy, King Leopold, I found a tourist brochure that said he had been a guest, sort of like George Washington slept here, King Leopold slept here, but they didn't mention anything about the atrocities that he had committed in the Congo. And it kind of, it stopped me from writing for a while. I thought, oh, don't put him in the book, don't put him, but it was another opportunity. So he has a cameo in the book. And if you go to the next slide, his presence is a source of disgust to the household employees, who are also dreaming of an escape to this utopian town, which really existed, called Deerfield, which was founded by African Americans looking for a safe harbor because this era was, they wanted to be safe from lynching, which was rampant in that era.
A reasonable thing to want to be safe from.
Sure.
Were you planning to bring in what's their name? The family.
The Grady family. They work in this big.
Planning to bring them into the story before you discovered about King Leopold, or did they become a device to give a social conscience to this monster.
No, I was planning to put them in, but it was interesting. I, you know, I felt that King Leopold would provide a very good, I don't know, a way to show what was happening in the 1910s, because that's when this novel is set. So the Gradys were there from the beginning, as were African American employees in the manor house in the early 1900s. But then when I saw King Leopold was there, I thought, well, what must they have thought when he showed up? So they got an even bigger role, especially when I found Deerfield, Colorado,
Right.
Which really did flourish. If you go to the next slide, for a number of decades until the Dust Bowl years.
Yeah, I was surprised that it really, I was expecting when, I go down rabbit holes, and when that showed up in the book,
Mm.
I read up on Deerfield, like, oh, what, I'm always terrified that awful things are going to happen to characters in books. And so it's like, oh my God, something awful is going to happen out in Deerfield. They're all going to get shot. But Deerfield hung in there. It really was the Dust Bowl that did it in.
Yes, it really was the Dust Bowl. And it was a shame, because I think maybe the railroad didn't come through as they'd anticipated, but, and maybe that was by design, right? Why should we go past this town and give them the business when we could give it somewhere else? But it is a ghost town now, and preservationists are looking to help its history be more well known. But I was very impressed by the fortitude of the people who founded it and their inspiration. So,
the other thing about the Gradys that I think is so wonderful that you did is that you use that Mrs. Grady is just silent and filled with rage. That she occasionally vents toward the food. The husband has the shuck and jive to the white folks
armor.
Yeah, that's his armor. And then the son is a cook to all the family, the royalty, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And so each one has a way of coping with the world. And the son, you start to hint at kind of integration of, because Jace is the son of the rich folks,
Right.
He has an actual conscience, and so there's actual communication between him and the son of Brady's. So I just thought that was a masterful example of building a story.
Yeah, Charlie, we were talking a lot about overlap between the kinds of art that you do so well and that I try to do. And when I was in college, when you knew me, I was doing a lot of acting. I was much more interested in the theater and studying how you build a character, and how much, just like an artist has to know anatomy to paint the human figure, an actor has to know a character's whole backstory, even if they only have 2 or 3 lines. And an actor has to know, what is my motivation? Why am I walking into this room? Who am I? So all those things were very helpful to me to say, well, okay, now I'm Jace, and now I'm Easter Grady, and now I'm Sylvie, and how am I thinking, and how am I relating, and what are my experiences, and how am I bringing them into the room? But Sylvie is relating to these folks too, this young daughter of immigrants. And if you go to the next slide, her chafing and her determination to find to be a striver like they are too, draws her to this figure, Mother Jones, who walks into this novel. She was this amazing labor leader that we don't know enough about from our textbook. She was just beloved by the workers. They called her mother, and she called them her boys. And she led strikes and went to jail many times in Colorado and West Virginia, and really helped the labor movement achieve the things we thank it for today: overtime and weekends. And She plays a pivotal role in Gilded Mountain. And if you go to the next slide, um, I have to say that the reason I was drawn to this history is that I found out that my ancestor, the guy in the picture in the beginning, was a strike breaker. He busted a couple of strikes. It was, of course, not the only one in this era. He was a classic management technique. You don't want to pay your workers anything, and it still is. You want to pay them as little as possible. So into the novel, if you go to the next slide, goes a handsome union organizer and the troubled son of the manor house. And these were just photos I found around in different albums. I think the guy with the cat on the left is my Kentucky farmer grandfather. But if you go to the next slide, what I do is I tack all these pictures and maps and lists of words and vocabulary up above my desk, which I'm staring at right now. And I look at their faces and I get them to talk to me, and I find out which features might be useful. And so it's a kind of a visual inspiration for me. And that's really the story of how Gilded Mountain got written and rewritten again over about 10 years.
All right. So we'll go to this. We'll do a little shilling for
Sure.
Gilded Mountain right now. Ladies and gentlemen, take the time to check out this amazing book. I'm going to show the banner here. Discover more about Kate's work at katemanningauthor.com. I really, the book is so much fun to read and so educational
Thank
about
you, Charlie.
it also, I was thrilled. I mean, when I started reading, it was like, Manning, Gordon Lish, our teacher, used to refer to people only by their last names.
And he would say it 2 or 3 times in a row. Manning, Manning, Manning.
Manning.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, because he would have us read. He'd have us read what we'd written that week. We were supposed to write a couple of pages every week, and we'd start reading it, and it'd be like, go, go, go. He'd show up drunk as a lord. And we're all smoking cigarettes, and we were smoking True Blues, I remember. But be like, go, 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 go. You're losing me, Manning. Oh, stop.
Sit down.
It was the most entertaining, inspiring class.
Yes. Yeah. And actually intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
Stopped me writing for quite some time, maybe 10 years. But I learned to read in that time. I learned what to read, and I learned that you don't do this as a Sunday paint or a weekend hobby. If you're serious about it, then you really, really do it, and your blood comes out your fingers as you're typing.
Right. That was my experience about writing. It's like I love writing. I don't love it enough. It's not what impels me. I mean, we're all storytellers, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
And we just find the medium that works best. Some people do it through instrumental music. Some people do it through rock and roll. Some people do it through writing. Some people do it through painting. Some people do it through sculpture.
Right.
So talk a little about you have referenced that you have family who were fairly serious painters.
Yeah, I did. My grandmother went to, we call it the CIA, the Cleveland Institute of Art, when she was, I guess she was born in 1912. So it was pretty unusual for her to have an art background, particularly as the daughter of Methodist ministers or whatever she was. But she was Bohemian. And my mother and uncle were very artistically inclined. And my mother painted. She was a Bennington girl. And she painted all her life. I have this above my desk because this kind of inspires me. This is her as a child. She would put, she really, I think I give her all the credit for making me a writer, because she pointed things out. She told stories. She had a play school where she would tell kids stories about a running character named Charlie the Eel Man. Another one was Harry Mary Secretary. And so she was a real storyteller. She had a wild imagination. She always, was saying, look at the light on the water, look at that tree, look at the way the shadow falls. And so I think that whether you're a painter or a dancer or a actor, those very specific noticings is really what makes a work original or bland and cliche, avoiding the hallmark sentiment that we hear so much of.
Right. Right. Well, we've got a couple of comments that have come in.
Oh,
First off, our old friend Julie Fulton
hi, Julie.
says best love to us both. And I believe Julie went on to she was an actress like on the TV shows and stuff.
She was a brilliant actress. In fact, I was in a play with her, and she was the star of it, and she was just dazzling.
And she does great poetry now.
I know.
Shares, on Facebook. Elizabeth Foreman, another JE person, says,
And another Gordon Lish writing class veteran.
Was Foreman in there too?
She was. I think she was.
Wow, a fellow freshman.
Mm.
Yeah, that would make sense because JE freshmen could get into it, but no other freshmen could get because
I didn't have that.
it was a JE. What did they call those classes?
I don't
We got famous people to come in. It was
master classes.
No, there was some. It was the thing that was evil about it is looking at it now is such a quid pro quo. They'd get the strivers who wanted to have taught at Yale on their resume.
Mm-hmm.
And Yale could say, oh, Howard Cosell did a course on sports.
Mm-hmm.
David Geffen did a class on the music business.
I don't think any of those people needed to get taught at Yale on their resume.
Well, they wanted it. They were insecure. They wanted that imprimatur.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tom Artwork says this is fascinating, and she's going to check out your book.
Thank you. I hope so.
There we go. So in terms of in painting, one of the things when I teach, the various truisms that I give is you've got, in terms of composition, you've got to give the eye a way to move through the picture plane.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very true of writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something I couldn't do with writing. Writing has the additional dimension of time, or it easily can. I guess you could write something where everything happens simultaneously. But art or painting is, representational painting is more one slice of time. But I do feel like how you compose the picture and how you compose the book are definitely analogous.
I think so.
The other thing that the truism that I give is that squint and look at the big shapes. So, and it gives the illusion of huge detail. If you do big shapes and then little bits of detail, it really draws the viewer in. What are there analogs to that in writing, do you think?
When you're writing a really long novel, I'm not great with the short story. I'm just too long-winded. But I think, yes, I think that I know a lot of writers will take their chapters and lay them out on the floor and move the pictures around and around. And that's how they need to see. They need to see that, or, I have cork boards stuck up along my bookshelves here, and I tack things up so that I can see the way it's laid out, and I can move this over here, and that's really the beginning. But then, so that's the big picture, and you're looking for the way the different plots are threaded through the narrative. But then the real way that another way that you get attention is with these very specific details, and saying, describing somebody's face, not, he had brown hair and he was tall, and you find a way to have detail carry emotion.
Hmm.
So, if someone is playing with the fabric on their shirt or their pants leg, or holding the crease of their trousers, that's a way of communicating nerves, rather than saying he was nervous. So that's a much fresher and more interesting detail. And I think that it's the same as the little details that you find. Just this corner of a painting is working for me. But
Right.
my mother and I would often talk about how, she would say, "Oh, I'm so excited. I think I did a really good painting today." And then she said, she might say, "Oh, I looked at it in the morning and I really didn't like it. And there's only one corner that's working and I have to fix it up over here." And I would say, "Yeah, but for me, it's like once I put King Leopold in the story, or somebody like that, it's like you can't get him out. You can fix it. You can fix the painting, but it's like you're just smearing the painting around, you wreck the whole thing. Or if you try to take this character out or this event out, it's baked in, and as you go forward, and maybe you're going to ruin the whole thing and have to throw it out."
Well, it's interesting as we were talking, as I was interrupting you earlier. My internal visual matrix, whatever it is that happens in my brain,
I think it's a matrix.
seeing, when we were talking about the Grady's, I was seeing a warp and weft
Mm.
of how you layered all this stuff together to create the tapestry of this book. That you have Sylvie and her family, and the father he's no fool. He's uneducated, but he's no fool. He understands the basic power dynamic that he's working with. The
Mhm.
mother is kind of the most naive of the characters, because Sylvie catches on pretty quickly as to what is happening in the world. So there's that family. Then there's the Grady's, who have learned how to deal with systemic racism, even though that doesn't exist in the U.S. You and I all know that.
No.
Um, and then the local royalty. You have the husband who is perfectly happy to. He doesn't think he's a particularly bad guy. I don't think.
No. Most bad guys don't think they're bad guys.
And then you have the faux countess who's perfectly aware of how she got where she is, and is trying to help Sylvie along as best she can. But then you have Jace, the son, who is a deeply conflicted person.
Yeah.
And the metaphorical thing, the metaphors that end up impacting the people. What I don't want to give spoilers away, but it's just this. It's like we are invited into this moment in time, and we're looking at it through all these different prisms, of what was going on in the U.S. It's sort of a feeling the elephant sort of situation. And then to have an actual historical character like Mother Jones come in was just delicious, to have her show up,
Yeah, she risks, when you write about Mother Jones, you risk having her hijack the whole thing, because she's so fierce and colorful and profane, and she had nicknames for everybody. She would call people lapdogs and blood-sucking leeches and vultures, and Colorado Governor Glasscock, she called him Crystal Peter, and everybody, I just couldn't resist her.
Right.
But you're right.
You sent her off to Trinidad.
I know.
I'm going off to Trinidad to help the boys down there.
Right. Well, she did. She was jailed in Trinidad during the Colorado labor wars, and the Ludlow massacre, and yet another massacre that we didn't learn about in school.
See, I grew up with Woody Guthrie records, and so
Yeah, yeah,
that's their song.
yeah, yeah.
That's the one where the women and children are in the
Yeah,
Christmas and the
yeah,
Pinkerton.
and there was a tent city along coal strike, Rockefeller coal mines in Trinidad, and they went out on strike and lived in a tent city and dug underground uh, shelters, and the National Guard set them on fire, and 11 or 14 women and children died under the flames. Anyway, it was another bloody chapter in American history. But you're right, Charlie. I mean, weaving all those things from the point of view of one character um, is tricky, and that's probably why this book took me so long to write. I started actually writing it in the third person, you know, but watching a person observe all these things. But I found that point of view. I like the immediacy of the I. I get a little tired of writing in it, but I think the she distances the reader more, and it may be a little bit of a colder kind of read. I'm not great at writing the close third person, which
Right.
some good novels can do.
Would be now that's interesting. So right, first person is this is happening to me.
I, me, I. Yeah.
The third person, you're saying there's a differentiation between a close third person and a distance third person?
Right. A close third person is almost like a first person narrator. There's an omniscient narrator, which is in the third person, he, she, they. But the close third is almost like you're inside the head of the he or the she, and so you're experiencing it from a much narrower, maybe. It's
Right.
expansive, but narrow. I'm not good at it. I can't even explain it.
Right, then stay away from it. I
Right.
paint monochromatic.
You like watercolor or you don't like watercolor?
Oh well, now are you at work now on another book, or is there more promotion of this book to be done? What happens in the life of a celebrated author?
Oh, well, thanks. I'm this is my last gig, I think, which I'm so happy about, to talk to you, Charlie, here in the Reasonably Fine Art Show. But I think I'm going to take the summer off. I'm going to take the summer off to work on my new story. And the paperback comes out in October, and I'll probably go around and about and blather on about it at that time, and I look forward to it.
Are you able to say what your next story is, or is that still under wraps?
Well, I think a lot of writers don't want to talk about it, because then by telling it, you lose the impetus to get it out in the world. So I like to say that it's about revenge.
All right. Is it based in anything historical as well?
Yes, I keep finding episodes in American history and people who are so amazing. I think, why didn't we know about this? How come I never heard of her? And that was the case with My Notorious Life, when I stumbled on the orphan trains, and I stumbled on Madame Restel, who was basically a reproductive rights pioneer in the 1850s. I mean, she sold birth control, and Anthony Comstock founded her. And it was his law. It's his law, the Comstock law, which we're grappling with to this day, 1873, which made it illegal to send anything obscene through the U.S. mail. And that included anything to cause a miscarriage, any information about birth control. And that law is still on the books, and it may very well result in the United States not allowing birth control or abortion pills to be mailed to anyone, anywhere. So 1873 dragged right back to Victorian days.
Yeah, and those who do not study history are condemned to repeat it. So, all right, so everybody should buy My Notorious Life as well. Not all you need Gilded Mountain. Gilded Mountain, this beautifully written page turner from my dear friend Kate Manning. You also need Notorious Life to understand what's going on in America today. Well, thank you, Kate Manning, for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. It's been great. And I'm sorry I didn't get to meet Betty Sue, but maybe next time.
Next time. Next time.
I'm going to hie myself up to Vermont and salute you in person.
Very good.
Okay.
Easy. Bye-bye, Kate.
It was really fun. Thanks a lot, Charlie.
Thank you.
Okay.